How are you?
Good, Joey. How are you?
Good. I have to admit I came late to the show. I think I was one of the people who was like, "Oh God, I don't think I can watch a show about the pandemic
Yeah,
or
yeah.
a pandemic." I'm sure everyone has said that. However, as soon as I watched this whole thing in like 2 days, which is probably not good to do,
I love that.
but it's just like I could not stop watching it. I truly believe it's like one of the most like beautifully vast shows I've ever seen. Like truly, no hyperbole. It's just like this to me feels like sort of like next level television. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh my God, of course. I'm so glad you liked it so much. And yeah, I think it's so great that you watch it so quickly. I mean,
Mm,
you know, this kind of a show, I love the idea of just watching it quick because all these connections and all this poetry and all
mhm.
these different things, you get to have, right in your command as opposed to having it kind of stretched out.
Yeah, like
And
I
that's so important with this show, to have an emotional reaction to when the Station 11 poem starts is like such a big, when any line from the Station 11
mhm,
poem happens. Like,
yeah.
it's so important.
It actually made me I mean I as soon as I finished it, I ordered the book. So I was just like I just sort of like need to live in that world a little bit more. So also it's just like some of the imagery of the show is just like breathtaking. It takes my breath away. Your score is so huge and you get to do so many different things in this. Um I guess the first question I wanted to ask you was this sounds generic, but like where do you start? There's like concurrent timelines, there's, jumping back and forth, there's before and after, there's a lot happening. So I guess I wanted to know from you, especially with such a rich source material and a rich script, um, what's the starting point?
Yeah, I can give you I guess a pretty exact rundown, I think. So the first thing that we did was Patrick and I began writing songs that
Okay.
existed. I read the scripts, and then Patrick and I started writing songs. Patrick said, what kind of folk songs would people write
Mm-hmm.
about the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
And, this was back in 2019 before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start writing these songs. I wrote Wandering Under the Moon,
Mm-hmm.
which happens in episode 2. Patrick
Yeah.
wrote What Happened, which is in the
Okay.
credits of episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
And then he actually wrote that on set, come to think of it,
Mm-hmm.
while he was filming. And we kind of threw that in later. But we each wrote 5 songs that was the agreement we made. We each write 5 songs
Okay.
for them to sing. So, and then only 2 of them actually made it in the show in their full versions, as opposed to just noodling in the back.
Mm-hmm.
But so we wrote those first, and then I wrote the Shakespeare music, and
Mm-hmm.
I was given videos of movies of Hamlet, and I scored the movies of Hamlet, and then it was a back and forth between me and the
Oh,
director
okay.
Jeremy to get the Shakespeare performances to time well with the
Mm-hmm.
music I was writing. So then
Okay.
after that, I had the first actual music for the show that was written was Patrick and Hero and I were on the phone. Hero Marai,
Mm-hmm.
the director of 101 and 103. Patrick and Hero and I were on the phone, and we were talking about how we could make a sound for the virus, and and the idea of it being sort of a natural sound going through an unnatural process came up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, what if I just took one note on a cello and put it through a harmonizer, which
Okay.
is the processing that Bon Iver and Imogen Heap use on their voice to make their
Okay.
voice sound all like robot-y.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I started doing it with a sample of a cello, just putting one sample of a cello like through a harmonizer, and it became this big chord, this big minor chord, and
Oh,
that became our first piece of music. We called it the Demon Cello, and you hear it a lot in 101 and 103. You hear it all over the place. Whenever we're kind of referencing the virus, you hear just that one chord, that string chord going.
oh
Um,
God. Okay.
but that and then so then the order, because we were filming in early 2020 and got shut down by COVID. We filmed 101 and 103. We filmed almost the entire episodes before the pandemic, and so so those were the ones that were edited first. So I was scoring the real world, the pre-pandemic world, the pre-pan world, 101 and 103 first. So, and that gave me the opportunity to write a Kirsten and Jeevan theme,
Right.
And a Station 11 theme, or you could call it a Miranda theme or a Station 11 theme. Miranda and Station 11 have the same theme. The book or the poetry of Station 11 have the same theme as Miranda, because she wrote the book in the story. And then we move over, and then the next thing that was ready was 107. So we jumped to 107, to episode 7, which is the quarantine episode where they're in the apartment for the whole episode. And then that was like that was the opportunity to really start fleshing out the kind of orchestral writing we were going to do for the show. You know, the kind of string writing and these kinds of bells and strings and piano instrumentation that was going to exist in a lot of the rest of the show. And then after that, then it was kind of like a more or less a straight shot from the beginning to the end. So I got to write those themes first, and then the Conductor theme and the Prophet theme kind of came a little bit later, because those episodes came later. But the Conductor theme ended up us grabbing it from the Shakespeare, because the idea is that the score is aware of the Shakespeare music, but the Shakespeare music isn't aware of the score. And then the score, and then the Shakespeare music is aware of the folk songs, but the folk songs aren't aware of the Shakespeare music. So it's like a fish eating smaller fish. It's like the actual score is the biggest fish, the medium fish is the Shakespeare score, and the smallest fish is the folk songs. So we have the Shakespeare quoting the folk songs. The Shakespeare in episode 10, you hear melodies from Wandering Under the Moon in the Shakespeare, and then the score is always quoting Shakespeare.
My God, man, you're blowing my mind here.
Is this too much? Is this too many?
No,
answers
that's great.
On one
No, that's fine. No, there's first of all, it's kind of weird that the word pandemic is now like such a part of the word. It's just part of our lexicon. It sort of freaks me out. I was gonna ask about Wandering Under the Moon just because I guess I wanted to ask how crazy it was to create an anthem for something fictitious, and then it happens, because there's a line in it that stuck out to me. I can't where did I put it, but the stars are brighter now after the doom. That really stuck out when I heard it. And I guess wanted to know what kind of a mind fuck that is for you to write that, and all of a sudden it works for both reality and the show.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, and I just want to let you know that I'm 100%. People get nervous when I say this kind of thing sometimes, but that's the one line I didn't write in that song.
Oh, really?
But I agree with you. It's maybe the best line in the song. Patrick wrote that line. So my original version of that song was when I showed it to Patrick exactly the way it is right now, except for the line, "The stars are brighter now after the doom," because Patrick was like, "Oh wait, no, we also were workshopping what objects it would be, and we landed on phones and tablets." But
I like that too.
Thanks. Yeah, for "The stars are brighter after the doom," Patrick was like, we have to give them a reason why it's better now, why Wandering Under the Moon is better now than it was pre-pan. So if we say, well, all these lights are gone in all the cities, and we can see the stars, that makes Wandering Under the Moon, because we couldn't go Wandering Under the Moon the same way before because the sky wasn't so bright. But now that the world has ended, the sky is so bright and we can go walking, which is a beautiful sentiment, Because and that's, I think, what one of the main feelings that when we talk about not wanting to watch the show, because it's like, well, we're going through a pandemic, it's like, well, part of the thing of this show is it gives you so much hope of what can be beautiful and how much joy there can be in any situation, sort of.
Yeah, I think that because I kept coming, wanting to come back to it because the fan base for the show is so unbelievably passionate. And so I was excited that you guys, got so many nominations. I didn't congratulate you. Congratulations on the nomination. It's
Thank you. Thanks so much.
yeah, it's I don't know. It's maybe if I would have tried seriously to watch it in the middle of it or of the pandemic or in the beginning of quarantine, I probably would have been able to do it just because everything was so up in the air. And
Yeah.
but now I think I'm a little bit more comforted because all the wonderful vaccines and everything like that. Okay, if I could ask you, about some.
It's less scary now for sure.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I was about to say I think I was too anxious to watch it originally, but now that there is some distance, yes, it's less scary. So I agree.
Yeah.
Could I ask you about some specific musical cues?
Sure.
That's okay. You may have brought this up earlier, but the when I was watching the show, the cue that plays, it's the first track that's on the soundtrack. Is There a Doctor? Whenever Himish is in the theater. The whole time I was watching the show, I kept thinking about the music to that. I don't know, something with the imagery of him like walking down the aisle, and it's sort of like this crazy thing where he's following his instincts to leap out onto a stage and just see what's going on. For some reason, that music really stuck out to me. What can you kind of tell me about that, since that's at the very beginning?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I when I talk about this piece of music, the easiest thing for me to do is to get really music nerdy about this.
Sure.
And I'm going to try to do it in a way that's accessible to non-musicians.
I have a musical theater background. I'll probably know what you mean. So
I feel like I sound very full. I don't know. I sound like a weird. Oh, this is a really complicated thing. But the idea of it was to have music that was grounded in one tone, and then have some of the music be completely pattern based and not be in a musical scale.
Right.
And
okay.
So what we technically you say, well, it is a scale. It's called the atonal scale, which means all 12, the chromatic scale, all 12 notes. It's based on this modern classical concept of a matrix, where you have shapes of notes of notes as opposed to scales. Sort of, you have a shape that the notes go in that you kind of abide by for the entire piece. And the idea was like, well, what if I made a piece that was like had this kind of shape to it, but then had one note that was just also being played by the pizzicato violin. So it's going like atonal note, normal note, atonal note, normal note, atonal note, normal note. So it's switching off. So you hear decca, 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 decca. The idea is to keep you grounded in reality enough with that one note it keeps going back to, but then having a shape that your brain will eventually accept, regardless of if it's not in any kind of musical scale.
That makes so much sense, because I feel like that is a very grounded way to musically interpret an unknown fear of what is going on. That's what
it's like. It's sort of like every other note is either like the panic versus like a grounded reality of what's supposed to be normal,
Yeah, sort of like the jaggedness of it. Okay, that makes total sense. All right. Another cue I wanted to ask about, probably because the visually the image really freaked me out, was there's two tracks that are side by side, at least on the soundtrack anyway. The first one I really want to talk about is I'm in the Death, where we see the airplane and the door opening, she's running towards the plane at that moment. And that goes into, at least on the soundtrack, into the title, He's Going to Kill the Traveling Symphony. There's something about, there's just like I wrote trickling tension. That's what I wrote down. But that's an example of the score feeling very heightened, and it really sort of informs us musically of drama and tension and fear and stuff like that. What can you kind of tell me about that section?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, like, at the end of I'm in the Death, there's sort of just like an everything but the kitchen table, everything but the kitchen table, Jesus Christ, but the bathroom sink, that's what they say, right? Approach to it,
Yeah.
where we're just kind of like more and more tones and just getting it as big as we can get it for that moment. And you know, and then it's interesting, like this is a fun thing when you're doing stuff that's very thematic, when you have a lot of melody in a score.
Yeah.
This is the thing though, I have to tell you, is that I rarely know the names to pieces, so I have to
Okay.
because they get named at the last second. I'm like,
Okay.
oh, 6M1. I think of them in code of
Okay.
but hold on, let me just make sure I'm not leading you the wrong way.
Yeah.
With okay, cool. So you know, with he's going to kill this traveling symphony, it's like we have this theme that's very known at this point, this da 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 da. And once you have a theme that you know that well, for like, you can just sort of have a drone and then just play the theme like without chords, just melodically all out, and your brain already knows the harmony of it. So your brain almost like compartmentalizes the notes because you know it. You know, like if you just heard me sing a random melody, you would kind of get lost as to the time and where we are. But if I sang you the Star Wars theme, you would be like, oh, I know where you are in every single moment of that. I can picture what the trumpets are doing. I can picture what the percussion is doing, blah, 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 blah. You know, so once we have that, that's the beginning of episode 6 that we get that piece of music. And we know this theme by now pretty well. So like we're able to just play like a bunch of like cellos and basses and violas in like octaves, just playing da 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 da. Your brain is like, okay, I know what this is.
It's like a sense memory thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I did want to ask, first of all, I was super excited about Deborah Cox. I mean, who doesn't love Deborah Cox just popping up in a post-apocalyptic dystopian limited series?
She's incredible.
First of all, she looks even better than I ever imagined she ever would look, even in this style of story. I wanted to ask, did you do the arrangement of Midnight Train?
I did, yeah.
Can you talk to me about that collaboration? Just because I'm a huge fan of her, just because I wanted to know what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, her vocals are all her. I mean, she is
sick.
That there, I had no input on the vocals. Patrick was just like, "Can you sing Midnight Train to Georgia?" And she's like, "Yeah, here we go." And she just sang it, and just like, you know, it's her. But so yeah, Patrick said he wanted it to be just a tuba and vocal cover of the song, but that also a guitar player could jump in at some point. And so that was the instrumentation I was given. And then, you know, it was just pretty much just, you know, getting the tuba to play the bass line and then playing the chords on the guitar. It's not a very complicated arrangement. But then at the last second, we realized we didn't have backup vocals we were allowed to use. And we didn't have the files we needed the night before the mix. And so I, in a panic of needing to get stuff done, sang the top harmony, and then Patrick Somerville sang the bottom harmony, and then our friend Paris sang the middle harmony. So we just like late at night, right before the mix, the three of us just kind of like rearranged the harmonies and did a new arrangement of it, like you know, for the next morning.
That's funny that you bring up the harmonies, because when the harmonies come in, I actually, when I was watching it out loud, I was like, "Ooh, harmonies!" Why? Takes very little to impress me, apparently, with Deborah Cox here.
When Paris and Patrick and I are hanging out, and that song comes, and when Midnight Train to Georgia, the actual recording comes on, we sit there hanging out. We're like, "I know you will." We just like start dipping into the backup vocals because we know it so well at this point.
Wonderful. With the traveling symphony, in terms of, I kept thinking of not distressed, but sort of like, I kept thinking of the instruments that they would have with them. I was curious what you can tell me about building sort of an orchestra within the realm of the show, and like sort of what are the advantages and disadvantages of that in order to create like a full sound, just because I kept thinking of how maybe an instrument would be like shoved in a bag or slung over somebody's shoulder like that, just because I think that's so integral to like the sound of that specific batch of people.
Yeah, I mean, we were like, you know, what can they have and what can't they have? Like, what instruments in this world will they be able to have? And you know, they have a cart, so they can drag around some things. You know, dragging around a piano would be pretty tough with having that much more weight. But an upright bass and a bass drum, that's doable. You know, those don't weigh anywhere near as much as one might think they would. But so yeah, I mean, the big, when we were like talking about doing this classical music for the Shakespeare, it was like, well, what are we going to do about, you know, I would like to have some sort of keyboard instrument. Patrick was like, yeah, they'll have the conductor's going to play a guitar. So that's her like writing instrument that she writes on. So, and he's like, and it's really cool because all she wants to do is play La Campanella, the classical piano piece, but the guitar is too small. So all she can ever do is do one hand of it. She can't do both hands. You can only do a little bit of it. And that's been and she's waiting for the moment where she has a real piano where she can try to play La Campanella again. And then she, you know, and she will do that eventually, you know, was the idea. And then we started, and then the conductor learned La Campanella and played it, you know, on camera. But yeah, we had the guitar, and then the idea was like, well, the guitar can have any like sampled sound inside of it is the idea. So the harpsichord sound from the orchestra comes from the guitar. So yeah, I mean, the idea is just to have all instruments that you can kind of like sling on your back or throw in a cart and go.
Really cool.
And don't need don't need electricity past a couple batteries. I don't know if we ever went into that on the show, them having to acquire batteries for the guitar.
I don't remember that. That does. I mean, the show is so rich that doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't happen. Okay. I think that's all the time I have with you, Dan. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I feel like I could just. This is the type of score.
Hey, you have another question? I mean, I have until 11 if you want to keep going.
I have to actually go to my next one, unfortunately. Actually, something that I do want to ask briefly. You kind of did mention it before, that I wanted to know about the theme of Kirsten and Jeevan, just because the music that plays when they're reunited, I literally started like crying just because I was waiting for it and I wasn't sure if I was going to get it. And so I think it's a very satisfying moment in the whole show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I wrote that as just Kirsten's theme at first, and then eventually it was like Kirsten and Jeevan have to share a theme. There's no way around it. But yeah, I mean, is there a specific question that you have about that theme? Or
I guess sort of just the emotional sort of payoff with it. Like it feels very genuine and it feels very earned. So, because, you know, sometimes music, especially with a really emotional moment, the music can take away so much, but it really sort of enhances this satisfying love really between these two characters. So I guess I wanted to know what it was sort of like to have written something that does provide that kind of emotional payoff.
Yeah, I mean, that means a lot to hear, you know. One thing that's very interesting is that I was withholding the entire show. I was withholding this one orchestration technique, which is to have all the strings play harmonies up above and then have the cello below it take the melody. I never did that once in the entire show. And then it was like, let's wait until that moment to do this thing. And it's going to feel like this. We've heard these strings a million times. We've never heard this version of it. But like, you know, the idea of it, instead of being the high one, having it do the low. Da, 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 da. Then have the violins come in. Da, 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 da. That I feel like that was like the main like concept that kind of like brought it all together for how that would work as this weird release that of a feeling that you've never had before in the show.
Oh God. I just got like a little emotional just hearing you explain that. No, I didn't know if we were gonna get that, and it was just sort of like just because the show does something so well that it encapsulates how I don't know, it's the show's not sentimental while it is emotional, and it is it's just this show could have been like, for a lack of a better word, like cheesy, and it's not. It's so like, I feel like the whole show was like pulling me like by my chest the whole time. I don't know, and it sort of this is gonna sound really dramatic, but it does sound sort of like that whole thing of, gotta tell people what they mean to you type of thing the whole time, just because you don't know when you're going to see them again. And some people, like Kirsten and Jeevan, they do get that at the end, and it's different. It's not what you expect it to be. Okay. I feel like I could just like sit and listen to the score like right now and just have you tell me a million things, but unfortunately I do have to scurry as much as I don't want to.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for all the kind words, and this has been such a great time.
Yeah, forgive me for just like.
No, I love it. That's my favorite. Please, this is great.
It's like this. I really want you to win. It's beautifully genuine emotion comes from the music. Like, I've just been listening to the music as I just like do stuff around the house, or like I was walking my dog and just listening to it and trying not to like turn into an emotional puddle. So
you know what I've been having recently with is the Kate Bush song "Hounds of Love." Do you know that song?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good song.
Oh, that song. Like, I can listen to that on repeat all day and just sob. I don't know what it is about that song.
Yeah,
it happens.
Yeah, it does. Well, thank you so much for your time and your generosity. Good luck to you. I know a lot of people on the site that I write for, very passionate, like a lot of other people. So we're rooting for the show to win a lot of stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Ray. That means a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, stay safe. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Talk soon.
Bye.
All right. Bye.